In the Garden of Eden created by God, there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the center. However, God strictly commanded Adam never to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, warning him that he would surely die. Thus, among all the trees in the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the only one forbidden to man. However, if the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was so dangerous, it would have been best for God not to place it in the Garden of Eden from the very beginning, leaving no possibility at all for man to eat its fruit. If he had done so, he would not have had to worry that man might by any chance eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Furthermore, there would have been absolutely no reason or need to command man never to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil while warning him that he would surely die. For even if the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was immensely dangerous, if it were out of sight, man would not have even felt curiosity. However, God placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the most conspicuous place in the Garden of Eden and commanded him never to eat it. Why on earth did God leave such a dangerous tree left alone just as it was? As someone said, did he give man the right to choose between the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Or was it because he had some other reason? First of all, however, man came to exist as a body of clay formed by God in his likeness, joined together with the life that God himself breathed into his nostrils. Among these, the body of clay formed in God's likeness became the physical body of man, and the breath of God became the life of man. This also implies that, at some point, man could once again be separated into physical body and life. It further implies that, for whatever reason, physical body and life could once again be separated. However, once separated into physical body and life, man dies. Therefore, it can be understood that man originally came to exist in this world with the weakness of being vulnerable to death. Whether by being crushed by a huge beast like an elephant, falling from a great height, or being pierced by something sharp, God already knew that man possessed such fatal weaknesses. Therefore, he made a firm promise that as long as man did not eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he would ensure that man would never die under any circumstances. This is one of the meanings contained in the command God gave to Adam, telling him never to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil can be understood not as a dangerous tree like poison, but rather as the tree of the covenant, established by God as a sign that he would eternally protect man from death. This was also the reason why God placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil right in the middle of the Garden of Eden. With the tree of the knowledge of good and evil being right in the middle of the Garden of Eden, anyone could easily see it. And anyone could easily remember God's covenant made with man. Thus, anyone could become a witness to the covenant between God and man. Afterward, however, just as the serpent enticed them, Adam, along with Eve, ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God had commanded them never to eat. Consequently, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was the sign of the covenant, was defiled. In this way, man himself directly broke the covenant established by God. As a result, man instantly became vulnerable to death at any time, and liable to die for any reason. He could die by being crushed by something heavy, by falling from a high place, or by being pierced by something sharp. Not only this, but all the animals that were under the dominion of man also became subject to death along with him. Moreover, the death that man invited into his life spread far and wide across the earth and throughout the whole world, including the sky and the waters. Jesus came to this earth to restore the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the sign of the covenant that man had defiled to its original state. Paya Mal Academy.